Sports and Recreation Center on the campus of the College of Staten Island. It's time for the Dolphin Pod, the official College of Staten Island athletics podcast. With your host, David Pizzuto.
Austin Mick with a 9-point lead. Mick flying to the perimeter, gets it over to Latunji for three. Dolphins work it back up to 12 points.
In-depth stories, reviews and previews, interviews, and so much more. It's all right here. And now for the Dolphin Pod, here is your host, David Pizzuto.
Welcome, everybody, to the Dolphin Pod right here on CSIDolphins.com and from wherever you are tuning in, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and the many more. This is a special video presentation of the Dolphin Pod as well. So if you're listening to us on the Dolphin Pod audio only on our website, we invite you to check out the broadcast on YouTube as well to get the video portion of this if you want to tune in to that. I'm David Pizzuto. I'm broadcasting from my home in South River, New Jersey, not the CSI Sports and Rec Center. That's a fake behind me. But Nick has the real thing behind him. He's at his home in Staten Island, New York. Nick, how are you this week?
Doing good, Dave. Really excited about this one. You know, I said we should do this face-to-face. I guess this is the best we can do, and we don't have to wear a mask to do it. So,
yeah, listen, we've been doing this since July 1, I think, just about that. So you figure you do the math. We've been doing this for 6 months. First time we've seen one another in those 6 months, literally, computer or otherwise. So it's good to see your face. It's good to see that that you're doing well and that your apartment or home or room that you're in is a lot cleaner than mine. Otherwise, I wouldn't have this background. So nice job keeping up appearances there.
Don't worry, I have my tablet angled. Even GD made fun of me, so I'm angled to the one clean spot of my section.
So if we move to the right, it's dirty laundry. If we move to the left, it's something else is going on.
Yeah, this is my one clean area of my stuff here. So
right. Well, listen, Nick, we have a great show today. Today's the day that we have the great Kenny Albert joining us on the podcast. He's going to be joined alongside Tony Petosa, who's going to be broadcasting from his home. We're recording this on Wednesday, and last night Kenny was calling that amazing Rangers-Devils game last night. I'm a huge Rangers fan, so the result was not what I wanted, but it was a really fun game to watch. The Rangers had over 50 shots. It was 4-3 Devils at the end, but Kenny's fresh off that game. He's got another one coming up tomorrow, so he squeezed us in to this day, and we're so thankful to really have him on the show to really tell us about his growing up as a broadcaster and what got him involved. And part of that was being right here on our borough of Staten Island.
Yeah, and before he even gets on, you know, you could kind of just tell what kind of guy he is, taking his time out to do something like this compared to the career he has. Like you said, he's broadcasting 2 professional games and he's squeezing us in the day in between. So his career is magnificent, especially if you're a New York fan in the area. So, you know, I know you look up to him a lot. I hear him all the time on these games. Didn't tune into the Rangers game yesterday, but we'll be listening to the Knicks game when he's on there for the next couple. Great guy, great voice. So really excited to just hear what he has to say about, you know, Staten Island culture when he was around earlier, and, you know, hear from also Tony. Because like you said, was it last week or the week before, about he just has stories. That's what Tony's got, is a whole bunch of stories, and
right.
you don't think they're true sometimes, but you go back and check them, and all of his stories are right. And, you know, he was good friends with Kenny back in the day, so excited to hear their Staten Island story from back in the day.
Yeah, and before we get to the actual interviews with Kenny and Tony, want to give you a little bit at home, you folks, a little bit of background on how this kind of came to be, because it seems like the booking itself seemed like, you know, where did we get this from? But really, it was thanks to one of my colleagues in CSI Sportsnet, when we do our web streaming service. Nick Durst came to us from St. John's University, very gifted. He does the engineering work for us on Sportsnet. He's called some of your games on the air, as well as some baseball stuff and some fall stuff. And Nick has his own podcast. It's called You Know I'm Right. It's from a website called In the Zone. And he's been interviewing so many colorful personalities in the sports world, sports radio, sports broadcasting, professional athletes, coaches, NCAA Division I and professional. And he interviewed Kenny Albert as one of his stops. And it was discovered during that interview that Kenny had ties to Staten Island and the College of Staten Island through an organization called the Staten Island Stallions, a USBL professional organization that was rooted in Staten Island at the time in the 80s. And lo and behold, Tony Petosa, I had no idea, played for the Stallions after his college career was complete, along with some other CSI players, but a lot of big-time Division I players who then went on to illustrious careers in the NBA. So they share that in common, and I certainly had no idea. Nick Durst, who interviewed Kenny, had no idea. And one of the things that came out in the interview as well was that Kenny worked for a time at Staten Island Cable, what then became Time Warner Cable, calling Island football games at Wagner College. And the last football game that Kenny Albert called was a 1989 Wagner College football game for Staten Island Cable. That was the last football game he actually did play-by-play for until he did one in Arizona with the NFL for Fox Sports. So I just thought that was such a wild story. And Nick was texting me this and telling me, you've got to have Kenny on. He would be a great guest with Tony, and really have to thank Nick for kind of setting that up for us and getting them on the air. But great story. And now we kind of get to connect those dots on how they came together. So it should be a fun one for us, a departure from what we're used to.
Yeah, like you said, it couldn't have happened without Nick. So much appreciation to him, and even for him reaching out to you to get him on. But I think it's a great segment, like you say, to break off from everything else we've been doing and to kind of just shed light on a fun topic and see where it goes. Because again, most of our stuff is kind of centered around one or two things on the show. This is just going to be, kind of Kenny, tell us how it was, and Tony, tell us how it was. So It should be a lot of fun this one.
Sure. Educational for us, for sure. A lighter show for those folks who listen to us and get to hear a little bit about the good old days of College of Staten Island basketball, and of course the great sports borough that Staten Island is. So that's all coming up after the break. When Nick and I come back, what we are going to do is we're going to step aside, take a break. When we come back from commercial break, we will have Tony Petosa, former head coach of the CSI men's basketball team, joining us, and we'll have the great sportscaster Kenny Albert right here on the Dolphin Pod coming up next. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Dolphin Pod right here on CSIDolphins.com.
Champions know how to seize opportunities. When they see moments of greatness unfold right before their eyes, they push as hard as they possibly can, and then they push harder. Because the heart of a champion never settles, never quits, and never stops giving its all. We are champions. We are Division II. We go big, we give it everything we've got, and we win. On the field, on our campuses, in our communities, for our causes, in our careers. We rise to become champions in everything we do. We are Division II, and there are no limits here. We make our time count. We set our own path. We become champions on our terms. It's time to up your game, because we're here to play and learn. But most importantly, we're here to discover ourselves, our vision, our heart, our drive, to achieve every goal we aim for, because we want to be champions at the highest level, life. At Division II, the opportunities are here. Are you ready?
Welcome back to the Dolphin Pod right here on CSIDolphins.com.
All right, welcome back, Dolphins fans, to the Dolphin Pod. This is Season 2, Episode 18, here on CSIDolphins.com, and from wherever you are listening or viewing this podcast. And obviously, this one's a special one for us because we got a really distinguished guest, nice enough to lend us a few minutes of his time, and that is the sportscaster extraordinaire, Kenny Albert, joins us on the Dolphin Pod. Kenny, how are you today?
I'm great, David. How are you?
I'm really well. Thank you for being here again. And of course, joining Kenny on this week's podcast is, of course, head coach extraordinaire at the College of Staten Island for many years, former player, of course, future member of our Hall of Fame. Just a matter of when we get back to action. Tony Petosa joins us for his second appearance on the podcast. Tony, how are you?
I'm great. I'm surprised I got past number one, but I appreciate it.
We'll see if I get past number one.
You'll be back soon, Kenny, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Well, guys, it's interesting. And when we learned that, Kenny was going to be on the show, Tony, you and I spoke for a little while on the phone, just, kind of talking about how you guys know each other. And Kenny, I guess I'll turn it over to you. It was surprising to me to learn how you two guys are connected, but tell us a little bit about how you and Tony met and, some of those early memories that you have of being on Staten Island.
Well, it goes back about 40 years, right, Tony?
Yes.
I was a camper at Kutsher's Sports Academy, summer camp up in Monticello, New York. I started there in 1979 when I was 11 years old. And a couple of years later, either in 80, 81, not sure exactly which year it was, the great Evan Pickman, who at the time was the coach at the College of Staten Island, became one of the head basketball coaches. Many of the CUNY coaches were up there my first year. I remember Gary Green from Brooklyn College and Bob Fox and Ted Hurwitz and a couple of others as well. They were all rivals and opponents in the CUNY conference during the season. And then they would all spend 2 months together up at Kutsher's teaching the kids. So I had 6 great summers up there. And when Evan Pickman began his career up at KSA, he brought along a number of his players, and Tony was one of them. And, I could rattle off so many other names, George Johnson, Tom Johnson, Jerry Koenig, Jerry Mosley. And I know I'm leaving out some, but Tony was part of that crew. And I became a big fan of the CSI Dolphins. I would go to some games during the season when I was 12, 13, 14 years old to see all the guys who I became friends with during those summers up in Monticello, New York.
Yeah, and Kenny, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've always been a Long Island guy. Is that where you were born and raised?
Well, I was born and raised on Long Island. Haven't lived there in about 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in New Jersey now for 21 years. I was down in Maryland for 5 right out of college, in Baltimore and Washington, and then lived in Manhattan for 4 years. So did grow up in Long Island, went to high school there, and I've been over on the other side of the George Washington Bridge in New Jersey now since 1999.
Right. So as a Long Island kid, around that time, obviously growing up, what made that connection to Staten Island? What kind of bridged that gap to get you there and to meet folks like Evan Pickman? Right.
Well, first of all, it was the years up at Kutsher's when I met Evan and all of the guys from CSI. And then in 1986 and 87, Evan was the general manager of the Staten Island Stallions of the US Basketball League, a summer league. And I was 17, 18 years old at the time, and was finishing up high school and heading into college. And I was obviously interested in broadcasting and also statistics and public relations and marketing at the time. So Evan hired me to come work for the team. So I spent many days over those 2 summers commuting from Long Island to Staten Island. I remember it was exactly 50 miles each way from my house to the office, which I think was on Forest Avenue. The team office was located on the second floor of a printing press. They were one of the big sponsors of the team. So I had various duties with the Stallions. During the games, I would keep the official scorebook, keep track of all of the stats. And in the office, I would handle some of the public relations and marketing and really anything else they needed. I would pick up players from the airport and drive them from LaGuardia or Kennedy to Staten Island. If anybody needed a ride to a game, I would travel with the team on the road. We had some games in Massachusetts and Connecticut and Rhode Island that I would go on the van with the team. And as Tony, I'm sure, remembers, we had some prominent players. John Hot Rod Williams, who went on to a long career in the NBA. I actually picked him up at the airport when he first came into Staten Island for the first tryout camp. Billy Donovan played for the team, who had just gone to the Final Four with Providence and went on to a career with the Knicks as a player, and then obviously a tremendous coaching career. A couple of guys who spent a lot of time with the Knicks, Eddie Lee Wilkins, Ken Bannister, they were on the team. Sean Couch, who played for Columbia, had a terrific college career. So Michael Graham out of Georgetown, who played on the Patrick Ewing teams. I might be mixing some of the years up. There were 2 years, so they didn't all play together, but they were all part of the Stallions. And like I said, Evan Pickman was the general manager, and the coach the first year was a gentleman named Gerald Oliver, who had coached for many years in the CBA. And then Tony Raffanello, a longtime high school coach on Long Island, Staten Island, excuse me. He was the coach during the second year. And that was sort of my second tour of duty on Staten Island. The first was when I got to know all the guys up at summer camp. And then 3 or 4 years later, I wound up broadcasting a number of Wagner College football games for a gentleman, the late Roy Menton, who had hired me at a young age in high school to work high school and college games on Long Island during my high school days. And then Roy wound up moving to Staten Island and ran Staten Island Cable. So during my college years in 87, 88, and 89, I broadcast a number of Wagner College games on Staten Island Cable. So I had the early 80s with Tony and the gang up at camp, summer camp, the mid 80s working for the Staten Island Stallions, driving 100 miles round trip every day in those summers. And then in the late 80s, it was those Wagner College games that I worked on the TV side.
Ask him how much the toll was over the bridge. Like 25 cents.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the team actually reimbursed me for that. So that was a good thing. I remember by the team office on Forest Avenue, there was a McDonald's on the corner. That was lunch almost every day. That probably only cost $3 or $4. And after the games at CSI, I would actually have to go back. This was before the internet. And I would have to take the official box score, drive back to the office on Forest Avenue and send it through a fax machine to the league office up in Connecticut. So my night wasn't done when the game ended. I still had to go back to the office to handle some of those duties as well.
You would have thought Pick would have been giving you the key to get into Joe Barisi's office to use the fax machine in there.
Exactly. I think we finally did that during the second year.
Great stuff. Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, so you kind of just touched on it now on everything you did. But you see a lot of sports now, and can you touch on Tony's game back in the day and what it was like? And then, you just touched on how you play or how you came into broadcasting. What really drove you into the broadcasting career?
Katie, before you answer this question, let me just say he's going to give you information when I was playing against NBA players. So that's really not a fair question.
Well, I'll take it back then, Nick, to before Tony's time against the NBA players with the Stallions. Up at camp, there were some terrific players working at Kutcher Sports Academy, and they had really competitive counselor games. They would play at night, and I did the scorebook for those games, and I used to get special dispensation to stay up like a half an hour later than some of the other kids my age until the games ended, because I was the official scorekeeper. And we had a guy named Chris Cummings, who was a tremendous shooter, who Tony remembers, who had played at Centenary with Robert Parrish and then tried out for the Denver Nuggets. And he worked up at Kutcher's for many, many years and hardly ever missed a shot. And Tony, I'm not sure if you were still there. Were you there? My last year was 84 when Rick Schmitz, were you there that year? Rick Schmitz was the
I was not there. I was there the year before that.
You were there the year before. So in 84, we had Rick Schmitz, who went on to a great career with Indiana. Ron Cavanaugh, who wound up playing for the Knicks, who was a 7-footer. He was a counselor up at the camp. And Joe Jones, who is the coach now at Boston University, was the head coach at Columbia for many years. So they were all counselors. Were you there with any of those guys the previous year, Tony?
You know what? I knew Joe from Kutcher's also, and the big guy, I got to meet him because I went up to camp to work 1 week. Okay,
so you were there with a couple of those guys. So they were tremendous players. Joe, I think, had played at Oswego. Rick Schmitz played at Marist. And a number of NBA players would also come up to give clinics during the camp years, and they would often take part in some of these games as well. So it was a terrific competition. And if I remember correctly, Tony, how tall are you?
About 6'5".
Right. I was going to say around 6'6". So you were one of the taller guys there, and like I said earlier, you had the mustache and the long hair, so you were an imposing presence in some of those counselor games. But there were some terrific shooters, and some of your teammates who I mentioned earlier. You know, I remember Jerry Koenig, who was like what was he, about 6'2", 6'3", but
Jerry's big. Well, he's almost my size, but he didn't.
Yeah, but he was a big bruiser, good rebounder, right under the basket. Tom Johnson was a big guy. He was probably 6'7" or 6'8", right? Yep. George Johnson was my counselor at one point. He was probably a little bit smaller. Jerry Mosley and Garrett Mosley were probably, the point guards at the time. But you guys definitely had some great competitions. It was a lot of fun to watch. And a number of NBA players would come up to play in the charity game, the Maurice Stokes game, every summer in August. And some of them would stick around and take part in some of the games with the counselors and handle clinics as well. So great memory. It's hard to believe it was almost 40 years ago.
Time goes by fast.
Yeah, and then can you just touch a little bit on, you talked about getting into the broadcasting and football first. Is that where you really wanted to go at the time, or is that just an opportunity that was presented?
Actually, hockey was really my goal. And growing up, Nick, I was on your podcast a couple of weeks ago, and it's certainly been well documented. Growing up around a father and uncles in the business, it's really all I ever wanted to do was play-by-play. And I loved all sports as a kid, and played all kinds of sports at camp during the summers. But really my goal, and I had such a great opportunity. I mentioned the late Roy Menton earlier, who hired me at both Cox Cable on Long Island and Staten Island Cable. And when I think back, I had such a head start on other kids my age at the time, because I was 15, 16 years old and had the opportunity to do play-by-play of high school basketball and football and baseball and soccer and lacrosse and hockey on Long Island. And we did some college games at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy as well, some of their basketball and football games. And I felt like at that time, kids my age did not really get this chance until college. These days, it's a little bit different. There are so many sportscasting camps out there. Kids start at a younger age. There are high school classes where they offer TV and radio. So, but that wasn't the case back then. I went to NYU. We had a terrific Division III basketball program. I'm not sure, Tony, you probably coached against them many times throughout your career. Mike Musio was the head coach when I started, and then Joe Nesci took over, and he's a Staten Islander, I think, right?
He's a Staten Islander.
Yeah, so he was the head coach at NYU for many years, and myself and a number of my friends broadcasted the games, the basketball games on the men's and women's side, and that was a lot of fun. And but like I said, my goal was hockey. I wanted to do hockey on the radio, and my first job was down in Baltimore. I was hired by a minor league team, the Baltimore Skipjacks, and I handled their radio for 2 years and also worked in the team office, public relations, marketing, same thing as when I was with the Stallions, picked up players from the airport, really whatever they needed me to do. And from there, I went on to the Washington Capitals for 3 years and wound up moving back to New York in the summer of '95 and was hired by MSG Network to do the Ranger games on the radio, which, as amazing as it sounds to me, I'm now in my 25th season with the Rangers. We've had 3 games already this season, including one last night, and also fill in on about 20 Knicks TV games every year when Mike Breen has a national assignment. Nick, you mentioned football. A number of us were in the right place at the right time back in 1994 when Fox really stole the NFC package away from CBS. Rupert Murdoch made a crazy bid that nobody expected. So have done NFL on Fox games now for 27 years. Baseball for Fox through the years, hockey with NBC as well. So, the early memories involve a lot of basketball when I was with Tony back in the 80s, and then hockey became the dream as far as the professional career, but very fortunate to be involved in all 4 sports and never feel like I'm working, even though there's a lot of work and travel that goes into it and preparation, hours upon hours for every game. It's the most fun job that I can imagine. I'm sure Tony felt the same way when he was coaching, and David and Nick with the work that you guys do as well. But never, one day in my life have I ever felt like I was, quote, going to work, which is a really great feeling.
Can I ask what drew you to hockey over the other sports, though?
That's a good question. And believe me, the other sports were this far behind. I loved them all. I played basketball as a kid, a little bit of baseball, played a lot of hockey. there must have been something about it. Maybe the speed of the game, the excitement. I remember taking Evan Pickman to a hockey game one time years and years ago. I think I was in college, and I don't know if he had ever been to a hockey game. And he's such a great basketball person, a coach for so many years, and then a scout for the Los Angeles Clippers for a long time. And I wound up taking him to a New Jersey Devils game. We sat in the stands, and I remember he was amazed that the players change on the fly. You don't have to wait for a whistle to change players; they come on and off the bench. So that was a fun night when we went to a hockey game together. But I love them all. I mean, I get to work tomorrow night with Walt Clyde Frazier on a Knicks game, so that's always any day that I get to work with Clyde is so much fun. On the football side, I've worked with Hall of Famers and great players, throughout their careers in the sport. That's really one of the fun parts of the job, is working with the various analysts in whether it's basketball, hockey, football, or baseball. And I have a list that I keep. I might hold the record. I've worked with about 225 color analysts in the different sports. I worked a couple of games with Patrick Ewing, believe it or not, when he was still playing. We broadcasted the Knicks Summer League games in 1996 on MLB Network, and he was the color analyst. I mentioned Walt Frazier. I've worked with Jim Spanarkel and Gary Williams, the former Maryland coach. We did one game together, and Wally Zerbiak and Kelly Tripucka and so many others. So I would say that's probably one of the most fun parts of the job is getting to know some of the color analysts and actually working games with them.
Yeah, it's so great to hear, how Staten Island in those times, especially in the 80s, ended up being kind of like a little hotbed of sports activity that really launched, helped launch your career. And obviously Tony and what he's done through the years. Tony, were you aware at the time of what a hotbed of basketball Staten Island was? Even in high school, at Farrell, getting used to the College of Staten Island and exiting there and then pursuing, coaching. Were you aware of just how good the basketball talent on the island was?
Well, I mean, Staten Island's kind of overlooked. I mean, it still is for a lot of reasons. I mean, again, one of the things I used to say when I was recruiting kids is people don't realize this, especially in the last couple of years, is 4 years ago, we were the 37th largest city in the country. Now, I'm guessing that we're at 33, 32 now. So there's a lot of people that come and go from Staten Island. And I always used to talk about CSI being a Division I program, because I feel like anybody who has been on Staten Island for an extended period of time has some association with the school. Right. It's like all roads go through the College of Staten Island. Even if kids go there just for one credit, because they need to make up credits for their school that they're at. So I could see why there'd be a lot of people from the island who are very dedicated people at all levels who will become successful and move on from there.
Yeah, terrific. And, obviously it helped launch your coaching career, and obviously a very long and distinguished one at the College of Staten Island. Were you, did your playing career, how well did it prepare you, especially as Kenny says, rubbing elbows with some of the nation's best basketball talents at the time as a part of the Stallions, after your playing career? How did that help you become a better coach down the line, or did it?
Well, I mean, first of all, it didn't help me I don't know if it helped me become a better coach, but it helped me realize that there's a lot of talent out there, because the guys that I was playing with were all very, very good players. And most of them, if they were lucky, if they were able to get not just a foothold in the NBA, but an extended period of time. I don't know if Kenny, I'm pretty sure that I have this right. We had a guy who played, Eric Fernstein.
Yes.
And if I'm not mistaken, he had won at least one medal, one ring, with the Celtics, possibly two. To have a guy like that playing alongside you and having him to be just a marvelous person and an intellectually really, really bright guy, it just tells you, what? I'm in a little bit of a bubble on Staten Island, and it's amazing how much talent there is out there, and it makes you realize what there is out there, and at some point kind of awes you a little bit, I think, in the beginning.
Yeah, and it certainly, springboarded a lot of basketball in your future, Tony, here locally. And for Kenny during that time, obviously springboards his career, moving on, obviously in the tri-state area, now working with a lot of our professional organizations. And Kenny, correct me if I'm wrong, but, I had heard a story that you had done play-by-play for an Islanders game, kind of, in place of someone else, and you kind of shop that as a demo for some of the later work. I think with the skipjacks. Can you talk a little bit about kind of being at the right place at the right time and kind of seizing that moment and how polished maybe you thought you were at that time to kind of make that be kind of a springboard to what was coming next for you?
Sure, absolutely. And just to finish on Tony's point, I didn't mention Eric Fernstein earlier, but I remember he was a great guy. He was just such a friendly gentleman, quite a personality, had played for the Celtics, as Tony referenced, and won championships and also spent some time with the Knicks. So aside from the players I mentioned earlier, there were a number of other guys who played in the NBA and were just, so much fun to be around as a youngster working for that Stallions team. The Islander opportunity came up during my college years, and I felt like one of the benefits to, Tony talked about, the hotbed of Staten Island basketball and feeling like a Division I program. I sort of felt the same way being in New York. Even though there are so many other great broadcasting schools, my daughter currently attends Syracuse. She's in the communications program, and I have a lot of friends who went there, and so many other great schools around the Northeast and around the country that have produced a number of broadcasters. But I felt like to go to school in the New York area, there might be some other opportunities outside school, internships, potential jobs. And I decided on NYU, and I felt like we had an advantage, those of us who worked at the radio station, because at some of these other big schools, you might not get the opportunity to be on the air until your junior year, maybe even your senior year. At NYU, we had 6 of us who were interested in doing sports on the radio, and we were all friends. And Tony might remember Rich Ackerman from KSA, who was a tremendous friend of mine right from the start in 1979. We're still close friends. We met at camp. We met in the bunk in 1979 at Kutcher's, wound up as roommates in college. We did radio together in college, and he's gone on to a terrific career at WFAN and has done play-by-play for Fox and for CBS Sports Network and a number of other outlets. So we were 2 of the 6 working at the NYU radio station, and to have the opportunity to call the NYU men's and women's basketball games, despite the fact that it was D3, it was a tremendous program. And we felt like we were calling Division I games. Kohl's Sports Center always had a great atmosphere in the gym. The team would win 17 or 18 games a year. And to us, that was just as big as if we were calling Syracuse games or, Rutgers down in the Big East at the time. So, we sort of, made those games into our Super Bowls, our championship games. And we would do pregame interviews with Coach Neshy, and we would do features on the players. And, we took it and ran with it. We had the opportunity to travel with the team. And NYU at the time joined the UAA, University Athletic Association, and they would travel to Boston to play Brandeis, to Chicago, to play the University of Chicago, Wash U in St. Louis, Rochester up in upstate New York, and Case Western and Carnegie Mellon. So for us, again, at the D3 level, you don't often get the chance to travel with teams and broadcast games. And those are some of the great memories that I have from the college days, because we would go do the road games. Terry Tarpey was on the team my freshman year, and he wound up setting the school record for all-time points at NYU. And I know his son went on to a great career at William & Mary, plays overseas now. So to us, it was a D1 program, similar to how Tony feels about CSI. But by going to school in New York, I had some other opportunities, internships. I would meet people at various arenas and sporting events. And I wound up as the fill-in host of the New York Islanders, as you mentioned, David, pre- and post-game show. And I did that for a couple of years. And when Barry Landers, the play-by-play announcer at the time, had to miss a couple of games for other assignments, I actually worked my first NHL game as a broadcaster on December 2nd, 1989, in Winnipeg. It was an Islanders-Winnipeg game on the radio. Mm-hmm. And, you asked about listening back, how well I thought I did. I'm sure at the time I thought it was great. Now when I listen back, and I've heard the tape in recent years, and I can't believe it's even the same person. And someone actually took the chance and sure, put me on the air at that time. Yeah. But, it's funny. I was able to use that tape. That led to getting the minor league job in Baltimore. It's usually the other way around. minor league announcers use those tapes to try and get NHL jobs or NBA jobs or Major League Baseball jobs. But I actually had an NHL tape, and I used that to get the job in Baltimore. So by going to school in New York and living in New York, that led to some of these opportunities that would pay off years later.
Terrific.
Yeah. And, you know, we talked about CSI a little earlier, and this one kind of goes to you, Tony, to just talk about the landscape of CSI athletics through your time. And what was it like before you got there? And how much change did you see through your decorated career that led into your coaching career?
Oh, you know what? I mean, that's a complicated question because, I mean, I was there for so long. That's a lot of change over the years. I mean, when I actually went originally, the Division III didn't really have academic requirements. So, and that was straight across the board. Only like some of the superior schools in the country had academic standards for the Division III teams. So CSI pretty much operated, if the kids came to practice, they were able to play regardless of what was happening with their academics. And over the first few years that I actually got the job is when things started to change dramatically in terms of, you know, having a certain GPA, a certain amount of credits. So when I first got the job, things became very difficult for me to keep kids in the building because they couldn't qualify academically. And then finally we got that situated, and then the CSI changed the standards like 3 times in like the first 15 years of me being there. So every year, each of those changes made it a little bit more difficult. That was probably the biggest difference. Is we had better students. The further along I went, the better the quality of students were, because they had to be. Otherwise, they weren't even allowed into the building.
Yeah, and then, you know, for you, Kenny, my question is, you know, you chose broadcaster. Have you ever thought about coaching through the way of this? Because obviously you could have went either way with what you started with in the Stallions.
The only other thing that as a you know, high school and college student that I had thought about was potentially sports writing. You know, I did a lot of writing for the school paper and the town paper growing up in high school, and then some writing for the college paper as well. So those were really the only 2 potential professions I thought about. I'm not nearly smart enough to be a coach, I think, at any sport. So, but I enjoy working with a lot of them. Some of the color analysts that I mentioned earlier, really love hearing their thoughts on the game. And, you know, I do a lot of studying and certainly think I know a lot about the various sports I work, but I don't know if I look to go into the coaching profession, not sure how well that would go.
Yeah, and you know, Kenny, one of the things obviously that stands out about your career is the, you know, eclectic amount of things that you do, not just sports, but for networks that you work with. And I know you've spoken about this in the past and it being a jigsaw puzzle and it all falling into place. But, you know, there's your commitments, but there's also your employers. You know, how do you prioritize what comes first or what comes second, and how do you make sure that all your employers know where you are at every given time?
It really is a jigsaw puzzle, David, and all of my employers are so terrific about the whole thing, the schedule. You know, very fortunate to have worked for Madison Square Garden now for 25 years and Fox for 27 years. And I've worked for NBC on the hockey side for about 10 years, and I've worked the last 5 Winter Olympics for NBC. During the football season, the NFL games usually take priority, and MSG is great about that. Similar to Mike Breen on the basketball side, he'll miss Knicks games to go work national games for ESPN or ABC. Sam Rosen, my colleague with the Rangers, did football as well for many years, and he would miss hockey games on the weekends. So they're really great about that. I think, you know, it's an honor for MSG as well to have some of their broadcasters work at the national level, so they have others in place to work when we're not there. You know, there are some crazy times pre-COVID, during normal times when the travel is, you know, I probably need, you know, 5 or 6 different calendars to keep track of everything. And there have been times in October where I've worked 4 different sports within the span of a week for 3 different networks with Fox, MSG, and NBC. You know, this year is obviously a little different following the pause last March. I was home for 146 days, which is obviously so unusual in my profession. And obviously everybody's health and safety was the priority, and still is, obviously. but that was a surreal time being home for so long. Normally I'm on a plane every other day, sometimes twice a day. So I was home from March 13th until the beginning of August. Then hockey started up again, and I spent 37 days up in the bubble in Edmonton calling games during the hockey playoffs. And that was a really fun experience. They tested us every day. I had a quarantine for 4 days when I first arrived in Edmonton in my hotel, but you felt so safe inside the bubble, inside the fencing, which surrounded the hotels and the arena. And like I said, everybody was tested every day. Once I got home, it was back to the NFL, and we did travel on weekends, did a lot of games in empty stadiums, which was obviously different than anything else that any of us were used to in the past. As far as the traveling, the planes were pretty empty, which was a good thing. The hotels were pretty empty. We were tested every week. And now that I'm into the hockey and basketball phase of the regular season, every time anybody enters Madison Square Garden, whether it's myself, the other broadcasters, security guards, anybody entering the building, you get tested at MSG that day. So as we speak today, I worked a Rangers game last night. I had a 3:30 COVID test. You wait about 45 minutes for the result, and then you're allowed in the building. So again, the health and safety is the number one priority of everybody involved. And it's a lot different because we can't go to practices. We can't speak in person to players and coaches. We're doing all of that on Zoom, similar to this one. But it's great that the leagues are up and playing again. Tomorrow night, I'll be working a Knicks away game, and we're not traveling this year. They're keeping the traveling parties smaller. So the visiting broadcasters in both the NHL and NBA work out of either their home arena or a studio. So with MSG, the Knicks and Rangers away games will be broadcast out of the studios right across the street from Madison Square Garden. So while the team is in Golden State and Sacramento the next 2 nights, and I'll be working those games, I'll actually be with Clyde Frazier in a studio in Manhattan.
Yeah, it's interesting because that was going to be a question I was saving for a little bit in how that works, and if the scenery of professional sports changes forever because of COVID, and of course being able to be at different places at the same time, maybe in the same day. I mean, you know all about that, Kenny, of having to cover one event, early in the day and then switching over and covering a completely different sport in a different venue somewhere else. So that's something that could change, forever, really, with the advent of things like Zoom and a lot more studio work going on now because of necessity.
Right. I would hope that at some point when things are back to normal, that we will be traveling again. A lot of it has to do with the vaccine and testing and the health and safety of everybody involved. But, I wouldn't be surprised if some things change, if some teams in smaller markets perhaps don't travel their broadcasters to every game, if they do it out of a studio off monitors. Hopefully that's not the case, but I could certainly see it going that way at times. Even some of the national games now, Mike Breen is working out of his basement on many of the ESPN games. Kevin Harlan and the other Turner announcers, they're doing games out of studios or out of their homes. I worked 2 hockey games for NBCSN the other day on Monday out of a studio in Stamford, Connecticut. So we have to adapt and adjust, and there are definitely more challenges working games off monitors if you're not in the building, but that's how it's going to be this season, and we'll try to make the best of it.
And something for both you and Tony, Kenny, when we're young and when we're chasing a dream, it's easy to kind of be on the go and hustling from place to place. But you're both family men now, and you mentioned a couple of daughters. Obviously, Tony has a little one at home, as well. Tell me about what role family plays in all this. You being on the road so much, obviously, wife and kids at home. How do you balance that? And Tony, same question for you, because for many years, you were a full-time New York City school teacher, part-time coach, really in name only. You're working at CSI 40 plus hours a week as well. So can you tell us the role that your significant others and your family plays when you're involved in the sports world like this?
Yeah, certainly a huge role. And I'm really lucky that my wife, right from the start, she understood what went into my job and my profession and the travel and working a lot of nights and weekends. So I really can't give her enough credit for what she's endured with for the last 25 or 26 years. But to us, it really became normal. My daughters are now 21 and 18. And I felt like when they were younger, yes, I did miss a lot of the activities on the weekends, and sometimes at night, but I was also around a lot during the day. Obviously, if I were on the road, I wouldn't be. But when I were home, if I had a long stretch of home games, I wouldn't have to leave until 3 or 4 o'clock. So I did get to partake in a lot of the activities on weekdays that a lot of my friends who had young kids could not if they were in an office somewhere. So
Sure.
yeah, I looked at it as a positive. They also have been able to tag along on numerous trips around to different cities in North America, but also to London. My family, for example, came to London when I had a football game there, and my wife came on 2 other trips to London. They came to the Olympics in Rio, Brazil with me. They came to the Olympics in Vancouver. They came to the Pro Bowl in Hawaii. So, it might not have been the typical vacations that a lot of kids get to take during, certain times of the year, but we tried to turn it into a positive. If I had to be in London for work, why not try to take them along? So we've had some great experiences in that respect. They've also enjoyed coming to games at MSG through the years. So, I tried to look at my schedule and my life as far as the glass being half full, my travel schedule and not being home a lot, certainly on weekends. I would look at it half full as opposed to half empty.
Good point.
My answer's not as eloquent. You know what?
Either, Tony.
It might be a reason why I was engaged to maybe why I went out with my wife for about 8 years before we actually got married. Might have something to do with the coaching. It's very, very difficult. And part of the reasons I decided to step down was not only was I did have a young daughter at the time. She's only 7 now. So she was, I think 3 or 4 when I resigned.
Goes fast, Tony. She'll be driving pretty soon.
Oh, yeah. You don't have to tell. You know what? She's already driving me crazy. So I got that. But it's an amazing thing. But at the same time, I was also taking care of my mom and dad for a lot of that time. And it just became so difficult for me to spend any quality time with my wife and my daughter that I just felt that I was shortchanging them. And honestly, if CSI had been a full-time job at that time, and that was probably the last question that I asked Charles before I resigned was, is there any shot that this becomes full-time? It's like, it could be, but we just don't know. And I understand that. And it's the primary reason why I felt that I had to step away with some other, issues that we were familiar with the CUNY itself. But again, it's the most special time in my life because it was a second home for me. I mean, I say that all the time. Very, very rarely do people go someplace to work and they don't want to leave. In our days, I used to spend hours upon hours up there, a lot of times by myself, that because I got stuff done and I felt I was accomplishing stuff. And even now, I mean, it's always going to be part of me that is like my second home. And I do miss it. But at the same time, I also know that my wife and my daughter and myself are probably better for me not doing it. Not that I don't want to do it, but it's better for me at this point in time that I don't do it, especially with this whole pandemic going on, because I spend almost every waking hour with my daughter now.
Yeah, and Kenny, I'm going to move to you. I'm very curious because you've done so many big games, so many big events. What's one that really sticks out to you as maybe your proudest moment or something that just holds so dear to your heart through your whole broadcasting career?
One I always think back to, Nick, is when Tony hit the game-winning shot in one of those counselor games back in 1982. I'll never forget that.
You're the man. You are the man, Kenny. That's all I have to say.
But no, to answer the question seriously, Nick, there are a few for sure that stand out. In 1994, when the Rangers won the Stanley Cup, I was not working for the team yet. I was still working down in Washington, but I actually had the opportunity to call that series on NHL radio. So I was in the building that night in 94. I get asked often about the Jose Bautista home run in the playoffs in 2015. I called that game on Fox for the Toronto Blue Jays. And also a number of Olympic moments, the women's hockey gold medal winning game in 2018 when the USA beat Canada in a shootout. I had the good fortune to call that game as well. A number of big NFL playoff games, the Giants-Jets game in 2011 when Victor Cruz had a 99-yard touchdown catch, and that kind of catapulted the Giants into the playoffs, and they won the Super Bowl that year. So there are probably a number of others as well, but those are the ones certainly at the top of the list.
But yeah, I honestly wish I could be part of half of that. I mean, even a minute of one of those games. But
you have top a lot younger than I am.
well, we'll see what happens. But same question for you, Tony, just on the coaching aspect. What's one moment through your career, other than hiring me at one point? What's something that you're extremely proud of, your proudest moment through your coaching career that sticks with you?
Well, you know what? I think it's always going to go back to the retirement to the Tournament of Heroes jerseys. For whatever reason, I mean, outside of what happened, I just felt that it was the first and really the only time that it was actually made an impact on people outside of the building. I felt it was really important for those families that they were made aware of. I know they were aware of how important their loved ones were, but how important they were to other people. And I thought that day went as well as it could ever go, not just because of our staff and because of our kids and the people in the stands, but also because of, at the time, Ray Rankus was the head coach at Baruch, and they had lost a kid also. And I just, things came together so well. And again, I just felt that we did a service to those families, and it meant so much to me. And I'm still very proud of that. And because I feel like, at least for a moment, I gave them an idea of how important those kids were.
And if I can interrupt for a second, I'm so glad you mentioned Ray Rankus, Tony, because he was also one of the coaches at Kutcher's who I did not mention earlier. And I have great memories of Ray, and we actually communicated via email for a couple of years before he passed away. So I was so happy that I had the chance to do that and reconnect with Ray about.
Kenny, I don't know if this goes on at the NBA level or even at the high Division I level, but at the Division III level, you would think you'd be friends with all these coaches, and it doesn't always work out that way. But Ray was a gentleman and as nice a human being as you possibly could meet. And I was very fortunate to have the opportunity not just to get to know him as a coach, but as a person. And he really was a special person.
He was, definitely was. And he was part of that great group with Evan Pickman and Gary Green and some of the others who I mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Yeah. And yeah, Tony, I couldn't agree more. Tournament of Heroes is definitely one of the staples of our program, and it's something that you put together and organized. And we're so grateful that you've done it and that we get to continue to do that every year for those families and for the many people that we lost on 9/11. Kenny, I know we're up against it time-wise, and we need to let you go. Can't thank you enough for your appearance. What I do want to ask is, our podcast is listened to by our student athletes, our student body in general. And obviously when they learn that you're going to be a guest on the show, what people want to know is that nugget of advice, that tidbit that you can give, young professionals, whether they're looking for a career in sports or otherwise. What are some of the things that you could tell some of our students regarding, breaking into the industry and making a name for themselves on a landscape like yours?
Well, I speak at a number of sportscasting camps every year around the New York, New Jersey area, and have continued on Zoom with a number of those groups over the last 10 months or so. And the biggest piece of advice that I always give aspiring broadcasters is try to get as much experience as you can in so many different areas, whether you're in high school or college, even if it's not your number one area of interest. Write for the school newspaper, take part in some of the TV and radio classes that might be offered. If you want to be on the air, learn about the behind the scenes jobs and vice versa. Many of the colleges now are linked with the conferences. I know the ACC and the Big Ten, for example, have their own networks, and they hire students to get involved in the broadcasts, not only basketball, but so many of the other sports that are offered. And it's an unbelievable experience that wasn't available even as recently as 5 or 10 years ago. So get as much experience as you can, follow your dream. If anybody listening or watching is interested in the communications field, broadcasting, journalism, again, whether it's on the air, behind the scenes, I'm easy to find on social media. So if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out. And, I want to thank you guys for having me on. This was a lot of fun, and would love to do it again sometime if you're ever in need of a guest.
Absolutely. We'll definitely take you up on that, Kenny. I hope that you and I personally can keep in touch. You're a phenomenal person. I think your appearance kind of, just further extends what we already know, and that you're a class guy, and your story is really inspiring to a lot of people out there. So, thank you for giving us the time again. We appreciate having you on, and again, look forward to the next time we can do this again.
Well, I really appreciate it. Thanks, David, Tony. Great to see you. It's been a while. Nick,
Great to see you too,
a few weeks ago, but it was a lot of fun. And just to reiterate, so many great memories on Staten Island back in the mid '80s, the late '80s. So it's great to reminisce. And good luck with the podcast. Stay safe, and look forward to doing this again soon.
We appreciate that very much. So that's going to do it for this segment of the podcast. When Nick and I come back, we will wrap this one up here, season 2, episode 18 of the Dolphin Pod. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Dolphin Pod right here on CSIDolphins.com.
In NCAA Division II, student athletes leave a lasting impression on their communities. That's because Division II student athletes want to make a difference and truly be part of their surrounding communities. Through community engagement, thousands of student athletes from various backgrounds interact with community members who view them as role models. This interaction leaves a positive and perhaps even life-changing impression on all those involved. In Division II, we rise to the opportunity and make community engagement ours.
Welcome back to the Dolphin Pod, right here on CSIDolphins.com.
Welcome back, Dolphins fans, to the Dolphin Pod, right here, season 2, episode 18, as we debut our show on Friday, January 22nd of 2021. We just finished wrapping up our conversation with Kenny Albert, sportscaster extraordinaire, doing all 4 major sports, play-by-play, the only broadcaster to be doing it, and for multiple different stations like the NHL, Fox Sports, MSG, Westwood One Radio. He's all over the place. Tony Petosa has agreed to stay on with us here as we close out this segment. And, again, Tony, Kenny pretty much confirming what we already know. Great guy to take the time out of his busy schedule to kind of reminisce on the old times. It was truly inspiring of him, and we were thankful for the conversation.
No, he's a pleasure. First of all, I don't get an opportunity to speak to him very much over since he moved on, and he obviously does a great job at his job. You're not going to find very many people who are as knowledgeable and as good at their jobs as he is, and it was an opportunity to see somebody I haven't seen in a long time.
Awesome, and Nick, this was a special treat for us. A little bit of a departure from what we're usually doing week to week, talking with coaches, student athletes, administrators on the campus. This was a nice little break to kind of talk about the good old days of the College of Staten Island and Staten Island basketball itself. And I learned a lot just from the names of those that played basketball here and connected the dots between Tony and Kenny. This is pretty cool for me.
Yeah, I think since I've been on the air, I think all of our shows have either been about what's we're doing moving forward or what's going on right now. So this is really cool to look back on everything and see what the program was and how far it came. And then even for, kids listening now, it's so cool to see somebody like Kenny, that he was a part of it at one point. Right. He knew about the program. He was part of Staten Island. So, like he said, dreams are possible for anybody. So keep following your dream, and one day you could be a Kenny. We'll find out.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what? I'm still kind of taken aback by the whole, Tony Petosa involvement in the Stallions, because I know when again, I know Tony for a long time, phenomenal player, but you rattled off some stories to me, Tony, on the phone, reliving some of your youth and some of these days, and there's a whole expose to be written about you somewhere, Tony. That book needs to come out at some point.
Listen, as long as it's G-rated, that's all that matters.
Well, and your CSI stories alone could certainly be a few chapters in that.
Yeah, they're not G-rated.
Absolutely. Well, listen, it was great having you on again, Tony. I know that you were on the show last year, right before the Tournament of Heroes, to talk a little bit about the impact of that tournament. It was a great show, and I learned a lot about what went into that event. And then obviously to connect you with Kenny now, I hope, again, this is not our final conversation on this podcast, because you have such a rich history, not only at our college, but on the borough of Staten Island itself. And I think that obviously you can't really mention Staten Island basketball without mentioning your name. So you're an iconic figure, and you certainly have a lot more stories to share. So we're hoping to catch up on those pretty soon.
I would love to take the time.
Excellent. And I like those drawings behind you. I meant to bring that up during the
well, you know what,
and those aren't yours, I'm assuming, right?
No, well, no. You know what, my daughter kind of has taken over every single room in the house, so we wanted to make sure she at least got some stuff in my office. So most of them are from the age of 5 and under, but there are probably a couple in there that maybe are over.
Excellent.
Well,
So, yeah,
Dave, at the beginning, I thought he put his daughter in the cabinet with the hands. I thought he was trying to get out. He had a soundproof cabinet back there.
Yeah.
There are sometimes it's possible. Maybe I'm thinking that though, Nick.
That's good. See, every show Nick has one of these zingers he puts in. That was good. I like that. That was a good pickup. Well, listen, next week on the show, Nick, we are going to have Nick Durst, who actually interviewed Kenny on his podcast a couple of weeks ago. Nick is a CSI staffer. He works for CSI Sports, and we want to talk about what he's doing for post-grad work. He's got a great story to tell regarding what he's doing in his 9 to 5 and all the great guests that he's lining up on his podcast that he's hoping to parlay to a career similar to Kenny's. So we're going to speak to him next week and see what he's been up to. So that should be fun for us, Nick, as well.
Yeah, really excited. And, Kenny gave me credit for that a couple of times. So
yeah,
through the thing, if you didn't notice, he kept saying that he was on. So I'll take the credit, but
That's
Nick
right.
does a great job with you doing the games. He's always there on the sideline. He's a great guy. And then, like you said, it's cool to hear from somebody of that age and hear what he's doing. For anybody that's listening to the cast, to see where you can pick up what he's doing and take it to your own level. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, and the one thing I said about Nick Durst, who's going to be our guest next week, is that if he is not a national sports figure in the next 3 to 5 years, I'd be shocked. So we're getting him now before he gets that big where we can't book him anymore. But I say that to him all the time, and I say that to my cohorts all the time, and I truly mean it. I think he's going places. But we're going to learn a lot more about his podcast because it's worth listening to as well. So that's going to do it for us on this podcast. So we hope you'll join us next week on the Dolphin Pod. Until then, have a great rest of weekend, and thank you for tuning in.
You've been listening to the Dolphin Pod. Remember to check us out next week when we bring you a brand new show. And check out our archive broadcasts throughout the year at www.csidolphins.com/podcasts or on any of the broadcast channels like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Radio Public, Breaker, and Google Podcasts. If you have questions, comments, would like to be booked on the show, or have an idea for a guest you'd like to see on the show, be sure to leave us feedback and catch all of our shows right here at csidolphins.com/podcasts. From all of us here at the College of Staten Island, thank you for listening to the Dolphin Pod.